Hollywood's golden age when stardom was manufactured as precisely as studio contracts, one figure stood apart in both brilliance and unpredictability. Marlon Brando was not simply a movie star, he was a disruptive force. His performances could silence a theater, while his private life generated rumors studios struggled to control. Behind the smoldering gaze and revolutionary method acting lived a man driven by restlessness, forming intense, often brief connections with extraordinary women. These were not careless flings of a celebrated leading man, but encounters with women whose intelligence, talent, and defiance mirrored his own. While audiences followed his scripted romances, the real stories unfolded quietly in late-night conversations, private homes, and moments never meant for headlines. Brando's story began far from Hollywood glamour. Born in Omaha, Nebraska in 1924, he grew up amid family turmoil and a mother's alcoholism. That instability forged a deep sensitivity and simmering anger that later fueled his art. Expelled from military school, he found his way to New York, where Stella Adler recognized his raw potential and shaped his rebellion into discipline. His breakout in A Streetcar Named Desire changed cinema forever. From The Wild One to On the Waterfront to The Godfather, Brando redefined what a leading man could be, even as his personal life grew increasingly untamed. Through the women who truly mattered to him, a more human, conflicted side of the legend begins to surface. Marilyn Monroe. The first encounter between Hollywood's most methodical actor and its most luminous starlet occurred at a party at the Hollywood Roosevelt Hotel, where industry insiders gathered to celebrate the premiere of a new film. She arrived fashionably late, drawing every eye in the room, not with calculated seduction, but with an almost ethereal quality that seemed to defy the harsh studio lighting. He watched her from across the room, intrigued by the contrast between her breathtaking beauty and the palpable vulnerability that even the most seasoned observers could detect. According to a production assistant present that evening, their first conversation lasted hours, with the two outsiders in Hollywood's establishment finding common ground in their complicated relationships with fame. Their secret meetings took on a ritualistic quality, often occurring in the least likely places where paparazzi wouldn't think to look: a cramped dressing room at the actor's studio, a late-night diner in the Valley, or the back booth of Musso and Frank Grill where they could talk uninterrupted. A studio publicist later recalled that the two would coordinate their arrivals separately, sometimes waiting hours for the other to appear, their patience speaking to a connection that transcended the instant gratification typical of Hollywood romances. In these stolen moments, they reportedly discussed their shared struggles with the studio system, their approaches to craft, and their fears of being trapped by the very images that had made them famous. The inciting incident that tested their bond came when a photographer allegedly snapped them, leaving a private screening at a small theater on La Cienega. The image never appeared in print, but according to a former studio executive, the threat of its publication sent both their publicists into crisis mode. The studios, desperate to protect their investments, reportedly arranged separate public romances for both stars to deflect attention from their private connection. This manufactured separation created a tension that neither could fully resolve, with each subsequent meeting tinged with the knowledge that their time together was borrowed. The escalation occurred when a tabloid received an anonymous tip about their relationship, forcing their respective handlers to implement more elaborate cover-ups. According to industry whispers, they were both pressured into attending high-profile events with other partners, creating a public narrative that contradicted their private reality. A letter later found among his personal effects reportedly expressed his frustration with this arrangement, describing how each staged appearance with another woman felt like a betrayal of something authentic and rare. The emotional toll of maintaining this duality began to affect their work, with directors on both sides noting a new melancholy in their performances. The consequence of this forced separation manifested differently for each star. While she would descend further into the isolation that would ultimately claim her life, he channeled his feelings into increasingly complex characters, most notably the tortured Johnny Strabler in The Wild One. A former co-star later remarked that during this period, the actor would sometimes stare into space during breaks, a half-finished letter to her lying on his dressing table. Their paths would cross only a few more times, each meeting bittersweet with the knowledge of what might have been. As a studio fixer allegedly told a young reporter years later, "In another life, those two might have saved each other. In this one, Hollywood wouldn't allow it." The connection between these two luminous stars remains one of Hollywood's most poignant what-ifs, a reminder of how the industry's machinery could break even its brightest lights. Rita Moreno, the actress with the fiery spirit and dazzling talent, first crossed paths with Hollywood's brooding method actor during rehearsals for a Broadway production that would eventually be adapted for the screen. She was young, ambitious, and fiercely determined to break free from the stereotypical roles that studios typically offered Latina performers. He was already a legend, known for his intensity and his refusal to conform to Hollywood's expectations. According to a production assistant from that era, their initial interactions were marked by a competitive energy that masked an undeniable attraction, two forces of nature recognizing something of themselves in the other. Their secret romance reportedly began during late-night rehearsals when the rest of the cast had gone home. The empty theater became their sanctuary, a place where they could explore their connection away from the watchful eyes of studio executives. A stagehand later recalled finding them in deep conversation on the stage long after rehearsals had ended, their voices echoing in the empty auditorium as they discussed everything from acting technique to their shared experiences as outsiders in Hollywood's establishment. These stolen moments became precious to both, a respite from the pressures of their respective careers and the constant scrutiny of the public eye. The inciting incident that threatened to expose their relationship occurred when a gossip columnist allegedly received an anonymous tip about their late-night rehearsals. According to industry insiders, the columnist confronted the studio's publicity department with questions about the nature of their relationship, forcing both stars' handlers to implement a damage control strategy. The solution, reportedly, was to stage a series of public disagreements and professional conflicts that would explain their time together as work-related rather than personal. A former studio publicist later described how they carefully planted stories about creative differences between the two stars, creating a narrative of rivalry that masked their private intimacy. The escalation came when the studio, concerned about the potential impact on their investments, reportedly began limiting their scenes together in the film adaptation. According to a script supervisor who worked on the project, entire sequences that featured both actors were either cut or rewritten to minimize their on-screen chemistry. This professional interference took a toll on their relationship, with each feeling increasingly powerless against the forces trying to keep them apart. A letter later found among his personal effects reportedly expressed his frustration with this situation, describing how each time they found a moment of connection, the industry's machinery would find a way to intervene. The consequence of this interference was a gradual cooling of their relationship, though the mutual respect and attraction never fully disappeared. She would go on to win an Academy Award for her performance, cementing her status as one of Hollywood's most talented performers. In her memoir, she would later allude to a relationship with a method actor who taught her about the importance of authenticity in her craft, though she never named him directly. He, in turn, would often speak of her as one of the most talented and passionate performers he had ever worked with, their professional respect serving as a lasting tribute to what they had shared. As a film historian noted in a later documentary, their relationship was a casualty of the studio system's inability to accommodate genuine connection between two people it couldn't control. The legacy of their time together remains not in what the public saw, but in the subtle influence they had on each other's craft and careers. Marlon Brando, the man who would become Hollywood's most influential actor, signed his first studio contract in 1949, marking the beginning of a career that would transform American cinema. Marlon Brando arrived in Hollywood with a reputation from Broadway as a difficult but brilliant talent, bringing with him the revolutionary acting techniques he had learned from Stella Adler. Studio executives were simultaneously impressed by his raw talent and concerned by his refusal to conform to their expectations. According to a former studio executive from that era, Brando's contract contained more moral clauses than any previous actor's, reflecting the industry's concern about his rebellious nature and unpredictable behavior. His early relationships with women were as intense and unorthodox as his approach to acting. Unlike many of his contemporaries who engaged in carefully orchestrated public romances to enhance their star image, Brando pursued connections that challenged him intellectually and emotionally. A former co-star from his early film years later recalled that Brando was drawn to women who possessed what he called an inner fire, a quality that went beyond physical beauty to encompass strength, intelligence, and a certain irreverence for Hollywood conventions. These relationships often began with intellectual debates that would last well into the night, with Brando showing a side of himself that few outside his intimate circle ever witnessed. The inciting incident that would define Brando's approach to relationships came during the filming of A Streetcar Named Desire, when he reportedly fell for a script supervisor who challenged his interpretation of the Stanley Kowalski character. According to a production assistant, their daily discussions about character motivation evolved into a deeper connection that threatened to complicate the production. The director, concerned about the potential impact on the film, reportedly separated them by assigning the script supervisor to work with other departments. This intervention planted in Brando's mind a suspicion of the industry's machinery that would only grow stronger with time, fueling his resistance to studio control over both his professional and personal life. The escalation of Brando's rebellion against Hollywood's constraints came with each successive film, as his star power gave him increasing leverage to demand creative control. According to a former studio executive, Brando began incorporating clauses into his contracts that gave him unprecedented freedom to choose his projects and collaborators, a move that sent ripples through the industry. This professional autonomy extended to his personal life, where he became increasingly adept at protecting his private relationships from public scrutiny. A former publicist later described how Brando would use misdirection and misinformation to keep the press guessing about his romantic life, sometimes even planting false stories to distract from genuine connections he wished to protect. The consequence of Brando's resistance to Hollywood's control was a career marked by both extraordinary artistic achievements and periods of professional isolation. While he delivered some of the most memorable performances in cinema history, his reputation for being difficult made some studios hesitant to work with him. In his personal life, his relationships often suffered from the same intensity that characterized his acting passionate beginnings, followed by conflicts that arose from his refusal to compromise his authenticity. A letter found in his estate after his death reportedly expressed his awareness of this pattern, describing how his commitment to truth in both art and life sometimes came at the cost of lasting personal connections. Despite these challenges, Brando's legacy as an artist who refused to be contained by Hollywood's conventions remains unparalleled, his influence evident in generations of actors who followed his path of authenticity over accommodation. Anna Kashi, the woman with the exotic beauty and mysterious past, first caught the actor's eye at a Hollywood party in 1957, where she stood apart from the typical starlets and socialites who populated such events. She introduced herself as Anna Kashi, claiming Indian and Welsh heritage, with a poise and intelligence that immediately intrigued him. According to a friend of the actor from that period, he was drawn to her apparent authenticity and the sense that she wasn't playing the Hollywood game like so many others. Their courtship was swift and intense, with the actor reportedly proposing marriage within weeks of their first meeting, swept away by a connection that felt different from his previous relationships. Their secret meetings took place away from the Hollywood glare, often at a small bungalow in the valley that the actor had rented as a retreat from his growing fame. According to a housekeeper who worked for the couple, these early days were marked by an intensity that bordered on obsession, with the actor often canceling appointments to spend time with Kashi, discussing everything from philosophy to their respective approaches to life. A production assistant from one of his films during this period later recalled that the actor seemed more settled and focused during this time, as if the relationship had grounded him in a way that his previous romances had not. The couple married in October 1957, with a small ceremony that surprised many in Hollywood who hadn't realized their relationship had become so serious. The inciting incident that would test their marriage came when a reporter allegedly discovered discrepancies in Kashi's background story, suggesting that her origins were not as she had presented them. According to a former studio publicist, the tabloids ran with the story, creating a narrative of deception that put the couple under intense scrutiny. The actor, who had always valued authenticity above all else, reportedly felt betrayed by these revelations, though he initially defended his wife against the media attacks. A friend from that period later described how the actor's protectiveness gradually gave way to suspicion as more details about Kashi's past emerged, each new revelation chipping away at the foundation of trust that had initially brought them together. The escalation of their marital troubles coincided with a particularly demanding film project that required the actor to be on location for extended periods. According to a co-star from that film, the actor became increasingly withdrawn and volatile during this time, often disappearing between takes to make lengthy phone calls to his wife. The distance, both physical and emotional, took its toll on the relationship, with each conversation reportedly devolving into arguments about trust, fidelity, and the growing media attention on their marriage. A letter later found among the actor's personal effects reportedly expressed his anguish over the situation, describing how the woman he had fallen in love with seemed to be slipping away, replaced by someone he no longer recognized. The consequence of these troubles was a bitter and highly publicized divorce that played out in the tabloids throughout 1959. The custody battle over their son, Christian, was particularly acrimonious, with both parties making allegations that would permanently damage their relationship. According to a legal assistant who worked on the case, the divorce proceedings became a spectacle that fed the very media machine the couple had tried to avoid, each new revelation adding to the narrative of a Hollywood marriage gone wrong. The actor would later describe this period as one of the most painful of his life, not just because of the end of his marriage, but because of what it represented: a failure of trust in a relationship that had begun with such promise. As a biographer later noted, the marriage to Kashi taught Brando a harsh lesson about the intersection of love and fame in Hollywood, that the more public a relationship becomes, the more difficult it is to protect its private truths. Movita Castaneda. The actress, with the sultry beauty and decades of Hollywood experience, first encountered the rising star at a party at the Hollywood Roosevelt Hotel in the late 1940s, when he was still a Broadway phenomenon, making his first forays into film. She was already an established presence in Hollywood, having appeared in numerous films and navigated the industry's treacherous waters for years. According to a costume designer who worked with both actors, Castaneda was immediately drawn to the young actor's raw talent and rebellious spirit, recognizing in him a kindred spirit who refused to be tamed by Hollywood's conventions. Their initial connection was professional, but it quickly evolved into something more personal, as they discovered shared interests and a mutual understanding of the pressures of fame. Their secret relationship reportedly began during the filming of one of his early movies, with Castaneda offering guidance and support as he navigated the transition from stage to screen. According to a production assistant from that film, she would often wait for him after shooting, providing a listening ear as he expressed his frustrations with the Hollywood system and his fears about compromising his artistic integrity. These late-night conversations in her dressing room, or over coffee at a nearby diner, became the foundation of their relationship, with each finding in the other a rare understanding of the unique challenges they faced as performers. A friend of Castaneda's from that period later described how she was initially cautious about becoming involved with the much younger actor, but was ultimately won over by his intensity and his genuine passion for his craft. The inciting incident that would define their relationship came when the actor's star began to rise rapidly, creating a power imbalance that tested their connection. According to a former studio executive, as the actor became more bankable, the studio began pressuring him to end his relationship with the older actress and pursue romances with younger starlets who could enhance his public image. This external pressure created tension between the couple, with the actor reportedly struggling to reconcile his personal feelings with the professional advice he was receiving. A letter later found among his personal effects reportedly expressed his frustration with this situation, describing how each meeting with studio executives included not-so-subtle suggestions about his personal life and how those suggestions were beginning to affect his relationship with Castaneda. The escalation of these tensions coincided with a period when the actor was filming on location, creating physical distance that compounded their emotional challenges. According to a location manager who worked on that film, the actor would often make lengthy phone calls to Castaneda between takes, their conversations sometimes becoming heated as they struggled to maintain their connection amid growing external pressures. The media, sensing potential drama, began speculating about their relationship, with gossip columns suggesting that the actor was moving on to younger, more appropriate partners. A former publicist later described how they were forced to stage a few public appearances together to counter these rumors, each photo op feeling increasingly artificial as the genuine connection between them became strained by outside forces. The consequence of these pressures was a gradual drifting apart, though the two would maintain a connection that would eventually lead to marriage in 1960. According to a friend of the couple, their decision to marry was partly a response to the industry's attempts to keep them apart, a defiant statement that their connection was not subject to Hollywood's rules. The marriage, however, faced its own challenges, including significant differences in their lifestyles and expectations. A housekeeper who worked for them during their marriage later described how Castaneda struggled with the actor's increasingly erratic behavior and his reluctance to embrace the stability she sought in their relationship. Despite these challenges, their marriage produced 2 children and lasted until 1962, with both parties reportedly maintaining a certain fondness for each other even after their divorce. As a film historian later noted, Brando's relationship with Castaneda represented his attempt to find stability with someone who understood Hollywood's demands, but ultimately, his restless spirit proved incompatible with the domesticity she valued. Rita, the young woman with the exotic beauty and serene presence, first caught the actor's eye during the filming of Mutiny on the Bounty in Tahiti in 1962. She was a local girl with no acting experience when she was cast in a small role, but her natural grace and luminous beauty immediately stood out, even among the stunning tropical backdrop. According to a crew member from that film, the actor was initially dismissive of the local talent, but found himself increasingly drawn to Terripia's quiet confidence and her apparent immunity to the Hollywood ego that surrounded the production. Their connection began with casual conversations on set between takes, gradually evolving into something deeper as they discovered a mutual appreciation for simplicity and authenticity in a world of artifice. Their secret meetings took place away from the film set, often at secluded beaches or small villages where they could interact without the scrutiny of the film crew. According to a local guide who sometimes accompanied them, these excursions were marked by a quality of ease and naturalness that the actor rarely experienced in his Hollywood relationships. In Terripia's presence, he reportedly shed the intensity and defensiveness that characterized many of his interactions, allowing himself to be vulnerable and open in a way that surprised those who knew him. A production assistant from the film later recalled that the actor's entire demeanor changed when Terripia was around. His voice softened, his movements became more fluid, and his famous temper seemed to dissipate in her presence. The inciting incident that would change the course of their relationship came when filming concluded, and the actor faced a choice between returning to Hollywood and staying in Tahiti with Terripia. According to a former studio executive, the actor's decision to remain in Tahiti caused considerable concern at the studio, which had invested heavily in the film and in the actor's star power. The studio reportedly sent representatives to persuade him to return, offering him lucrative new projects and appealing to his professional responsibilities. These overtures created a tension between his personal desires and his professional obligations, with Taripia reportedly encouraging him to follow his heart rather than the industry's expectations. A letter later found among his personal effects reportedly expressed his internal conflict, describing how he felt torn between the world that had made him famous and the woman who had made him feel truly at peace for the first time in years. The escalation of their relationship came with the actor's decision to remain in Tahiti and build a life with Taripia, a move that shocked Hollywood and signaled his growing disillusionment with the film industry. According to a friend who visited them in Tahiti during this period, the actor seemed genuinely happy and at peace, trading his Hollywood mansion for a simple island home and his celebrity status for the anonymity that island life provided. The couple married in 1962 with a ceremony that blended traditional Tahitian customs with their own personal vows. A family member who attended the wedding later described it as one of the most authentic and emotionally resonant events she had ever witnessed, free from the artifice and calculation that typically characterized Hollywood unions. The consequence of this marriage was a period of relative contentment and stability in the actor's personal life, though it came at the cost of his relationship with the Hollywood establishment. According to a biographer, his decision to prioritize his relationship with Taripia over his career led to a decline in his Hollywood prospects, with studios becoming increasingly reluctant to offer him roles due to his perceived unreliability and his reluctance to participate in the promotional activities that were essential to box office success. The couple had 2 children together and maintained a home in Tahiti for many years, though the relationship eventually faced challenges as the actor struggled to balance his island life with periodic returns to Hollywood for work. A letter found in his estate after his death reportedly expressed his enduring love for Taripia and his gratitude for the peace and perspective she had brought to his life, describing their time together as the closest I ever came to understanding what really matters in this world. Despite their eventual separation, their relationship remained one of the most significant and transformative of his life, representing a genuine attempt to escape the constraints of Hollywood and find a more authentic way of living. Of Rita Moreno. Their story did not end with youth, scandal, or heartbreak. It circled back years later, shaped by time, regret, and hard-earned wisdom. When Rita Moreno and Marlon Brando encountered each other again, it was not planned. Both attended the Hollywood event out of obligation rather than desire. She had become an Academy Award winner and one of the most respected performers of her generation, admired for her versatility, resilience, and integrity. He was already a living legend, revered for his talent, but burdened by a reputation for volatility that had distanced him from the industry that once worshipped him. According to a mutual friend present that evening, when they noticed each other across the crowded room, something unmistakable shifted. The years seemed to collapse in an instant. What replaced them was recognition of shared history, unspoken understanding, and an emotional bond that had never fully dissolved. Their reunion was unplanned, but to those watching, it felt strangely inevitable. Their renewed connection unfolded quietly. Instead of secrecy driven by fear and scandal, their meetings took place in calm, private spaces, small restaurants, personal homes, places where they could talk without performing for anyone else. A personal assistant who worked for Brando during this period later described these encounters as fundamentally different from the past. The tension that once defined them was gone. In its place was maturity, honesty, and mutual respect. They spoke openly about their lives, their regrets, and the price each had paid for surviving Hollywood without surrendering their principles. Friends of Moreno noticed a change in Brando when she was around. He appeared more reflective, more grounded, less guarded. One longtime friend remarked that Moreno seemed to give him a mirror through which he could finally examine his own legacy with clarity rather than defensiveness. The defining moment of this phase came when Moreno was cast in a film directed by someone with whom Brando had a notoriously painful history. A producer from the project recalled how Brando became deeply protective, offering guidance and warnings shaped by his own experiences. His concern went beyond professional courtesy. It revealed a bond that had matured into something layered: part friendship, part loyalty, part enduring love. A letter later discovered among Brando's personal belongings reportedly expressed his wish to shield Moreno from the harsher realities of an industry that had wounded them both. As Brando's health declined, Moreno remained a constant presence. A caregiver from his final years recalled how her visits transformed him. Conversations drifted from early career memories to reflections on Hollywood's evolution. When Moreno arrived, his usual reserve softened. Family members observed how his face would light up, how warmth replaced his habitual detachment. After Brando's death in 2004, Moreno spoke openly about their bond. She called him one of the great loves of my life, while never ignoring the pain they endured. In her memoir, she wrote with clarity and restraint, refusing both romantic myth and bitterness. A film historian later summarized their relationship simply: it was rare, enduring, and real. In an industry defined by illusion, their connection remained authentic, evolving across decades, rooted in respect, understanding, and a shared devotion to truth in art. The Hollywood studio system of the 1940s and 1950s functioned less as an artistic culture and more as a tightly controlled corporation. Stars were investments, not individuals, and studios existed to protect those investments at all costs. Through publicity departments, morality clauses, and constant surveillance of private behavior, studios engineered personas designed to be safe, aspirational, and commercially reliable. Former publicists later admitted the goal was never authenticity. It was stability. Anything that threatened public approval or box office revenue was reshaped, redirected, or quietly buried. This control extended beyond studio gates. Gossip columnists, editors, and photographers became informal enforcers of the system. Powerful voices could elevate or destroy careers overnight, often trading silence for studio-approved exclusives. Scandal was allowed only if it could be managed. When uncontrolled publications exposed what others suppressed, they were met with lawsuits and intimidation. Behind the scenes, fixers orchestrated fake romances, staged photographs, and misleading narratives. Stars were expected to perform their roles both on screen and in life, creating a corrosive split between public image and private self. Against this backdrop, the handwritten letters discovered after the death of Marlon Brando are revealing. Addressed to women across decades, they show a man searching for authenticity inside an artificial system. The handwriting shifts, but the theme remains constant: a longing to be seen beyond the image. As Brando aged, that search turned inward. He withdrew from public life, accepted change, and resisted illusion. In the end, behind the machinery and the legend was a man still looking for something real.